Hello and welcome to the Get French Football News Preview Show on today, February 2nd, 2017. I'm Eric Devin, and I'm joined by our regular panelists Nathan Staples and Adam White. We'll also have a special visit from Rich Allen to speak about Rennes and their potentially disastrous January window. Before we get started with previewing the matches, though, the Coupe de France had its round of 32 midweek, and the matches, particularly yesterday, had more than their fair share of excitement. On Tuesday, the higher-ranked teams generally had their way, with Bergerac's 2-0 defeat of Lens, the lone out-of-division upset. Bordeaux beat Dijon 2-1, thanks to a dramatic late winner from Gaetan Laborde. Lille topped Nantes 1-0 through Sebastian Corch's penalty, while Marseille got an extra-time winner from unlikely hero Doria in their 2-1 defeat of Lyon at the Velodrome. Yesterday saw a bit more in the way of giant killing, though, as relegation threatened Angers, thumped Saint-Etienne in extra time 3-0. Guingamp were taken to extra time by fifth-tier Les Herbiers, and third-tier CA Bastia held off Nancy 2-0, while Monaco, down to 10 men, played the day's most thrilling encounter, a 5-4 extra-time win over FC Chambly. And Paris Saint-Germain did their duty as well, of course, recording a 4-0 routine win over Rennes. We'll have to wait a month for the round of 16, but the draw has served up some mouth-watering ties, including Angers with a difficult trip to CA Bastia and Marseille hosting Monaco. So then, gents, we'll get started with a brief review of that action. I know, Adam, you've watched a couple of matches, so I'll ask you, any takeaways from the Cup action? I mean, Nantes showed some good ambition against Lille, who've really come into form. They're unbeaten in 6 without conceding more than one goal in any match in that span. Patrick Collot in the process has used a variety of tactics, and with some of this new talent coming in, the likes of Anwar El-Ghazi, Ricardo Kishna, and others, could this be the start of another late-season rise of the table by Lille? We saw something similar last year, after all.
Yeah, it seems to be the way their seasons seem to progress these days. They sort of start terribly, get rid of their manager, and then sort of slowly recover and end up last season. They finished fifth and made the Europa League, which obviously didn't go too well for them at the start of this season. But I think it is. I think I like the direction that they're going. They've made some interesting signings and some interesting players leaving the club. Sankara going to Bordeaux was a strange one, given that he's sort of only just signed. But I think they're very much another club, and it's another season for them on the up. I would just like to see them have the opportunity to start well and maintain that form to really see what they could do, because they're a big club. Obviously, they won the league in 2011, and they're one of the top, in terms of size of club, they're one of the top 6. So I think they're very much on the way up. It wasn't the best game against Nantes. As you mentioned, they were a bit more enterprising than usual, perhaps most so far under Conceição, but it was a drab game, and Corchard took his penalty well to avoid extra time. But I think it's another step in the right direction for Lille, and hopefully we'll see them near the top of the table and using these some really interesting signings. For Houli, El-Ghazi are good players. I hear good things about Zeka from Braga as well. So yeah, I think it's an exciting time for them at the moment.
All right, Nathan, what about Lyon? And they struggled without Alexandre Lacazette, but they did play a 4-3-3 for a change. Even in a loss, do they take some heart from this match?
A little bit. The real worry, like you mentioned there, is that they struggled without Lacazette, which is the worry we had on Monday for them, if that continues as well and he's out for a couple more games, because they didn't really have the penetration. They didn't have that man in the middle of the park that really threatened Marseille on a consistent basis like Lacazette can do. I know he's been maybe a little bit in and out and a bit of a penalty master this season, but he's still a difference maker. He's still someone who stretches defenders and makes them think on the back foot, and he's someone you have to take account of. And I don't think that was the same in this one. Genesio playing a 4-3-3, it will be a different formation next week probably. So it's nice that he did play the formation we really want to see this team play in, but I don't know if there's an enormous amount you can take from this game, in all honesty. They played a little bit better, but they played better against Marseille in the league a couple of weeks ago. They're such a hot and cold team that it's so difficult to tell from week on week which Lyon is going to turn up at the moment. But I think going forward, at least, they should try this 4-3-3. I think it works better for the players they have in midfield, especially. Yes, they have a number of attacking talents, but you can spread those out of those 3 front men. And I don't know what you thought to the game, Eric. Obviously, you being a Lyon fan, but what did you think to them and how they performed against the Marseille side that are at least boosted by the returns of Payet and the like?
Yeah, I think that the changes that we saw bringing on the likes of Fekir and Depay it made them quite a bit more incisive, quite a bit sharper. I mean, Fekir, I think, has been frustrated by a situation recently, but I think he offers more directness than do either Valbuena or Ghezal when they're on their game. Maxwell Cornet did not really impress as a striker. I would like to, if Lacazette's still injured, maybe see Depay get a chance there. I think that with his pace and ability to drag players out of position, he could potentially be a catalyst there. I know he's generally been a winger, but I do think he has the right combination of an eye for goal and upper body strength to play that role successfully. So we'll have to see what happens come Sunday. Moving on now to our Ligue 1 focus. We have an update on predictions. So Adam, we had Tony on in a show that unfortunately did not get recorded the way we wanted it to. So we used his predictions in your stead. He did manage to pick up a couple points for you.
Good man.
48. I'm on 49, and Nathan's on 40. So let's start then looking at Matchday 23 with Saturday's big match, and that's Nice and Monaco. Now, Nice recorded a good win over Guingamp last weekend and are starting to have some semblance of their regular team back with Johan Cardinal and Jean-Michel Seri both making their returns. Nathan, doubts still linger over Nice, though. Do Les Aiglons need to win this to put themselves back where they were prior to the break in terms of being title favorites, contenders?
Absolutely. I think they need to win this game if they want to be in that title race for the long haul. What Champions League, I think, is something they'll probably sew up in. I can't imagine them falling off the horse that dramatically that Lyon would catch them unless they had a really dramatic fall and really started losing a number of games. But yes, they need to win this one. They looked much better against Guingamp at the weekend. They had some hairy moments at the start of the second half, but especially in the first half, they looked, after the first 5-10 minutes where they sort of settled into the rhythm a little bit more, they looked much better. And instantly, the one man you point out is Jean-Michel Seri, who's a fantastic footballer. They've really missed him. I think he brings a much more of a balance to this midfield. I mentioned, I think a week or so ago, that Romeo Walter really struggled without him in the sense that he was maybe ploughing a bit too forward. Cyprien wasn't disciplined enough without him. With him back in there, Cyprien did take that sort of more reserved role, but he does it so much better when there's a player closer to him, reminding him that he needs to sit in front of that defence and protect them at times. And it made such a difference because Yellow was given more room to express himself and be that wonderful, wonderful player that he can be, and we know he can be. Balotelli was decent, and although he drifted in and out of the game, he scores his goal, as he always seems to do. Player was decent as well. The defence was reasonably solid, other than, like I say, about 15, 20 minutes after the second half where Brion brought Guingamp back into the game. But yeah, they need to win this one. It's going to be a tough game. Monaco might be a little bit flagging after that extra time. That's maybe their semblance of hope. They've obviously had the week off, so I don't think that you can count Nice out completely. The doubts are there because of that everyone thinks they're going to fall away. But if they can keep people fit, if Belhanda can come back sooner rather than later, and they can keep that same 11, much like I don't want to put a curse on them, but like someone like Leicester City did last season, where they played a similar starting 11 every week. If they can manage to do that down this closing stretch of the season, and they win this game, they are going to be there or thereabouts.
All right, Adam, let's look at Monaco, who, after almost being embarrassed in the Coupe de France midweek, should be riding high after their command performance in Paris. Are they still title favorites regardless of this result?
I think they probably are. I've maintained the point of view that, for me, they're the best team in France at the moment, regardless of obviously PSG have spent pretty well in the January transfer window, and I think that's almost a sign of respect to how well Monaco have done. I think PSG are genuinely quite worried that the title isn't going to fall into their lap as it has for the last 3 or 4 years. So I think that's a real dot of their cap, if you like, to how well Monaco are playing. If they were to lose this game, they'd be 3 points behind Nice, and PSG probably would win their game. They'd be level with PSG, so it really would put the title race back amongst back in the throng, if you like. So it would be a big blow for them to lose. But should they win it, they don't necessarily end Nice's challenge, but it makes it look very difficult for Nice now, given that they've lost to another one of their big title rivals, and PSG is still playing catch up. So a win here would really cement their place place as favourites and perhaps end Nice's challenge to some extent. Like obviously there's a long way to go and there are a lot of points to play for and the gap isn't too big. But I think Monaco will really take heart from that performance at PSG last week. It was probably the first time in years that PSG have looked like the second best side at home at the Parc de France in Ligue, and Monaco deserved to win that game. The fact that they had to survive off that Bernardo Silva equaliser in injury time was incredible, really. They were the better team for pretty much the entire game. So they look like the best team in France, and for me, they're favourites here. One thing that could work in their favour, quite oddly, is that I fancy them to beat Manchester City in the Champions League, and I fancy PSG quite obviously to lose to Barcelona. So it could come to the fact where PSG not being in Europe could be a helpful factor over those weekends, and Monaco might have a difficult quarter-final with someone, maybe even semi-final, where PSG don't. So that's a factor to consider, perhaps. But I think Monaco are the best team in France, and that should keep them as favourites, regardless of the result. Unless they really, unless there's some aberration, I think, yeah, they're still favourites.
All right. What is your score prediction then, Adam?
3-1 Monaco.
All right. Okay, Nathan?
1-1.
Okay. I am going to go with a scoreless draw. And then I am going to bring in Rich Allen now. Rich is a expert on Rennes who writes for French Football Weekly, among other sites, just to try and get a handle on what's been going on with their winter window. So here is a previously recorded clip with Rich ahead of our preview of Bordeaux versus Rennes. All right, we're here now with Rich Allen. You can find him on Twitter at Rich_Allen85. Rich is a distinguished writer for French Football Weekly and is a Rennes expert. So, Rich, we've had a very interesting window from Rennes. Disappointing, I would say, overall. What are your thoughts on the window? Is this a build-up to summer? Is this a giving up the ghost? Or what's going on at the club?
There is a big feeling that's been very underwhelming. Main departures, of course, Paul George and Tep and Kamil Grzycki. Lost them for, considering their talent, relatively low prices. You're looking at 8 or 9 million for Ntep and not a great deal more for Grzycki, which, considering he went to the Premier League and everything that we know about the Premier League and their love for splashing the cash, does make you feel as though they perhaps undersold him and was a player that obviously wanted to go. So you then look at the replacements, and there's not a great deal to get excited about. There's been a lot of dissatisfaction amongst Rennes fans that the board really are sort of contradicting themselves. We've had Rennes president René Ruello come out very recently in the local press saying, look, our strategy and our plan for the club is developing these young talents through the academy, watching them progress, developing them into these great players, and then obviously, the big clubs are going to come along and take them. We're not in the market, and this is pretty direct quote, really. We're not in the market for 29 to 30-year-old players. That's then, only a couple of hours later, they announced the signing of 31-year-old Morgan Amalfitano, which probably is a sign. I've got nothing against the player, but it's a signing that probably sums up Rennes' transfer window of incredibly underwhelming.
So, do you feel that this is a statement of intent in terms of the club's belief in the likes of Adama Diakabi and Adrien Hunou, or is it just simply these prices are too good to ignore for the club?
It's difficult to say the prices are too difficult to ignore because they're such a financially secure club. They've got one of France's richest businessmen, behind the scenes that owns the club. There's now been a big turn within the fan base of now's the time that this guy needs to be putting the money into the club. Really, he's kept them financially sound for a long period of time. We now need to push on. We know that we've got the academy that can produce these talented players. I go as far as saying Joris Gnagnon has been one of the standout young players in the entire league this season. So we know that, but we can't rely on that. We have to, you have to bring in those experienced players to play alongside them, and that does mean you've got to spend the money. You can't go window to window picking up free transfers of players who are either not good enough or just over the hill. So I see it as a turning point, but I see it as a turning point sort of almost behind the scenes, with the fans and the relationship with the club. There's a feeling now that actually, what, they're getting to enough's enough. We need to see what the sort of positive going forward plan is, and just saying relying on the youth, sadly, is not going to be enough.
All right. Can we say anything positive about the players being brought up? We have international. Russian Bowley is international as well.
I'm relatively okay with the Mboli deal because we know Costile will leave. Sadly, it's going to mean he's going to leave in the summer on a free. He's not going to hang around. He is now to the point where this is his chance to get that big move, and so he'll get that big move. I've no doubt about that in the summer. So to bring Mboli in, he's an experienced goalkeeper. He's not. He's not an amazing goalkeeper. He's not going to be as good as Costile, but he's going to ease that transition a little bit. Paul Nardi's probably now in Belgium thinking, why didn't this happen back in the summer? And a lot of Rennes fans may be thinking that as well, because we were quite excited to bring Nardi to the club, but then got one chance in a Coupe de la Ligue match and conceded 7 to Monaco. Mboli, I'm relatively okay. I was initially quite looking forward to seeing what Kalulu could do. And it's still too early, I think, to make a judgment on that, but he's not been particularly impressive. The system that Rennes are playing doesn't suit him. I think him as a lone striker up front with Gourcuff just behind, it doesn't work. I know it's not his perhaps favourite position. I'd quite like to see him played a little bit out wide. And I think with perhaps Sio returning from the African Cup of Nations and Wesley Saïd returning from a slight knock, I think we might start to see that, and that's where we might see a bit more from him. But I do think they could have added a bit more spice to that team. There is a spark lacking now with Grzycki gone, with Ntek gone. There is just that spark that's missing.
All right, and then what about Christian Gourcuff? I mean, is he signed up for a project that has a positive cast to it, and selling players in this manner, is that something you're worried about him potentially departing as well?
Christian Gourcuff is the right manager for the project in so much as bringing the youth through. We've seen him do that time and again with players at Lorient. He's a good coach for the young players to learn from. I have no concern over that. What I have a concern for is I don't see him as the long-term coach. You don't see him there, 5 years' time, taking us to that next step. For me, when we were looking for a coach back in the summer, I was praying beyond belief we'd go for Gourvenec. There was the history there with him having played for us. It seemed to be the perfect match. They missed out on him. They signed Gourcuff, brought Gourcuff in as coach. Not a huge problem with that, but I think he will be concerned over exactly what's he being asked to do. It seems that he's been asked to do a very difficult job in quite tricky circumstances. The fans are still on his side. The fans, I think, can see that he is trying to do them and make the best out of a bad situation. He's not doing the huge wholesale changes with the likes of Montagnier. He's got a good core squad. He's brought players through into the first team, and they've really shone. So the fans are very much on his side still towards the end of the season, and as the slim chances of European qualification slip further and further away, as I'm sure they will. We'll see whether that changes. But for now, I think he's got fans on side. He's got the board on side. But I think the trust from him to the board is perhaps slightly strained, I think, over the last few weeks.
All right, and finally, Ben have taken in quite a bit of money, the sale of Dembele, the sale of Moreira, and these two big sales in the winter. Is there any chance the club loosen the purse strings in the summer, or is this going to be another rinse repeat with a bunch of cut rate players?
I'd like to think that what they will see is we have these talented young players. We have the likes of Adama Diakam. We have the likes of Joris Nyanya, and we saw very fleetingly recently in the Nantes game James Leah Saliki, who had a pretty decent, quite exciting 15, 20 minutes or so. So the young players are there. I think Christian Gourcuff has been, he's been there, seen it all. He's got the know-how, and he will go to the board saying, look, we're going to need some money. Whether then the board will listen to him, you'd like to think the player, a coach with the experience that Gourcuff has got and the success that he had actually on quite a limited budget, I suppose, at Lorient. I'd like to think that they would. I think they're going to be forced to. I think we're going to see more and more protests, if you like, both social media-wise and perhaps also in the flesh from the fans. And I think that's one thing that actually has, over the years, been quite a good relationship between fans and the club. And they're not going to want to ruin that. And I think we will see a bit more money than we've seen in previous windows spent with Rennes. So fingers crossed.
All right, thank you very much. Rich Allen, you can find him on Twitter at Rich_Allen85, a Rennes fan and writer for French Football Weekly. Thank you very much for joining us, Rich, and shedding some light on a confusing, bizarre, frustrating, choose your adjective window for Stade Rennais. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, and that was a little clip recorded earlier in the day with Rich Allen. So now we've heard our expert on Rennes. How does this match stack up? Nathan, do they have a chance against Bordeaux, who seem to have shrugged off their loss to PSG in the Coupe de la Ligue, and they've even strengthened in midfield with Younous Sankharé?
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting signing, to be fair, especially with Gregory Sertic leaving to Marseille. And I'm sure Rich will be disappointed that the man he wanted in the summer in Gourvenec is in the dugout against him at the weekend. I think Bordeaux have really improved in the last couple of weeks. I've been really impressed by the progressive Valentin Varda in the midfield. I think he's a really interesting player. I've seen him a few times last season and he seemed a bit more defensive. All of a sudden he's turned into sort of a more box-to-box kind of player and scoring goals. He probably should have scored a couple against Toulouse as well, other than Lafont and the post keeping them out. So yeah, this is a really interesting Bordeaux team now with Malcolm finding the minutes. You've mentioned in the past, Eric, that Ounas is really out of the picture at the moment. So that's the one who's getting his chance in Malcolm. They look more dangerous. Laporte's been really decent as well in that centre forward position. I think he's a really important player for them now and really gives them a focal point in this side. And I worry about how competitive, at least in the top end of the table, Rennes will be with those departures that they've lost. And Tep was such a big player. Grosicki, although fleeting, he can be really, really good or really, really bad depending on what day or what side of the bed he decides to roll out of on that day. I think that with the momentum they've got at the moment, Bordeaux, with they really lack a focal point, and Rich touched upon it very, very expertly, that they don't really have a spark. I worry that they're probably putting a little bit too much weight on the shoulders of a young Diakhabe to try and make something special happen, and maybe having a breakout season in his own right, where he's shown glimpses of being really, really talented. But I wouldn't put the weight of the world on his shoulders, which is seemingly what will happen. So, yeah, I really worry for Rennes in this one.
All right, let's get our predictions then. Nathan, I will start with you.
I'll go 2-0 Bordeaux.
Okay. And I will go with a 1-1 draw. Seems to be Rennes' preferred result of late. Adam, yourself?
1-0 Bordeaux.
Oh, okay. Before we move on to our last two matches, I did want to take a more expansive look at the window. So two questions for you guys. One, what is the best individual move in Ligue 1? That's one player being purchased by a club. Adam, I'll start with you.
I'm going to go with one that I was really happy to see, and as a Manchester United fan, I'm very happy that he's returned to Ligue 1, and that's Patrice Evra. I realise that it's probably one from slightly left field, given the money flying around with Depay and Draxler and Payet, but I think one thing the Le Marseille defence has lacked for some time is a leader. And if Patrice Evra is anything, he's a personality and he's a leader. And I think he's going to add so much to that back four. It's just for his presence both on and off the pitch. I'm really looking forward to seeing him back in the league. I think he will really make that defence, just from his sheer force of personality alone, a much more solid unit, and as a sort of lead by example and help those other players through the game. So in this league, he'll be really effective, and it's great to see him back in the league. So Patrice Evra for me is as the best individual signing, and probably Marseille is the best team overall. I think when you look at Sanson, Sertic could be a really good player. Perhaps he'll play at centre back. Payet obviously is going to be fantastic. So yeah, I think they've made some really good signings overall. So Evra and Marseille for me.
All right, Nathan, what about yourself, individual and team?
Well, yeah, there's been some really interesting signings. Obviously, the headliners are the likes of Payet and Draxler, obviously going places, and there's been some interesting signings here and there of young players. But it's going to sound maybe a little left field, but I really like Bastille's signing of Prince Onyanga on loan from Wolves. I know he's not really done too much in England, and we've seen him quite a bit at France, formerly at Reims, but especially in that game against Nice, he was absolutely terrific in that midfield role of being a little bit more unshackled than he was previously in France, where he was used as a defensive midfielder, and he was sometimes at Wolves as well. But with Yannick Kawazak in that middle and Mustafa, who are more bruisers is maybe the nice way of putting it, really. They're the enforcers in that Bastille midfield, and they really struggled for a link between them and the likes of Crivelli and Alan Saint-Maximin. And I think Onyanga is that man, especially in that game, like I mentioned, against a Champions League chasing side. He was absolutely relentlessly hounding Malang Sarr, and it really upset the youngster, and he was absolutely phenomenal in that game. And I think having someone like that in the team may make the difference between staying up and staying down, in all honesty. And that's what you really want from a signing. It's the same, I think Diabate as well at Metz might be that kind of signing because of the goals he might bring. He might be enough to keep them up. Those kind of signings for bottom teams are absolutely crucial, and I think that's a really good one. In terms of team, I'm leaning on the fence. I would agree with Adam. I think Marseille have had a terrific window, but I'm actually going to go with Lille. They did a lot of their business in the last minute with about 7 coming through the door as if they were rushing them all through as soon as they could. I really like they've got some really interesting signings. We've already mentioned a few of them. Anwar El Ghazi had a really good 6 months last season at Ajax. He fell off a little bit and he's gone down the pecking order this season. So if he can pick back up the form that he showed earlier, which was electric with great finishes from distance, I'm really excited about him. And the same with Kishner, who's obviously formerly of Ajax and went to Lazio, and a lot was expected of him as well after sparkling in the Eredivisie. They're both really interesting, quick attacking players, and that's what Lille have really missed with Eder up front. He's very lackadaisical. Whenever Depriville's been on the field, it's been more exciting. Lopez has got more involved, but you can move him into a more central position with those two playing out wide and possibly Benzia in there. It makes a much more exciting, interesting Lille attack with a load of young, quick, exciting footballers that could really be a basis maybe in next season of a mini Monaco, almost like a budget Monaco, which is a really exciting way and interesting way of doing it. And I'm really looking forward to see how all these new players and all these young players blend together.
All right. I will chime in here as well. I think that for an individual signing, I would have to go with Morgan Sanson. I think that this player is really talented, incredibly versatile, has a great drive, great motor, is a lovely tackler of the ball, can also get forward really well. I think that particularly if Marseille continue with this 4-3-3, he's a building block of this team for the next 4 or 5 years, and he can continue to evolve with the team to be, of a European standard. Potentially, making his debut with the senior team for France and seeing this team play in either the Europa League or the Champions League. For team, I know this may sound a little bit strange given their placement in the table, but I really think Metz did well. I think Cheikh Diabate has looked strong in both matches he's played in. It gives that team a much more consistent outlet than Mevlut Erding or Hadji. And I think that Falo Diagne as well. He was a solid player at Rennes, and I think is a good option, whether he's used in central defense or in defensive midfield. Whether or not Metz stay up, I don't know, but I think that they do deserve quite a bit of credit for getting proven Ligue 1 performers in positions of need, even if they are struggling a bit. And now, moving on now, who had the worst business? Adam, I'll start with you.
It's an interesting one. I'm going to go with a pair of answers, both relegation fighting clubs. Firstly, I think Lorient have missed an opportunity massively. Given that the players that they've sold, over the past 6 months or so, Guerrero, Yan Juve, and Dong, they didn't replace them in the summer, and I was hoping that they'd sort of stay in touch because I quite like them as a club. I think they're a really interesting team. So they sort of limp along to the transfer window, and then they go out and they'd really go and replace those players. And I really don't think that they've really been able to do that. I know that Wakaso was really highly thought of at Rio Ave in Portugal. The Portuguese analyst rates him really highly. But I don't know that they've really gone and replaced those players overall. So I was expecting them to really go, really bring in some players and they'd be fine. But now I think even with Pyburns in there as well, even though he's a solid defender, he's been good at Bastia for a number of seasons. It's I don't know if it's enough. So I think that they're in trouble still. And down there as well, I think, although it's sort of gone under the radar a little bit, but Nancy losing Clement Longley is a huge loss for them. He was the only player that was really guaranteed a place in Angel Carrera's team, given he's such loves rotating for virtually no reason whatsoever. But it's working for them. They're up to sort of lower mid-table, and given they started the season so poorly and looked out of their depth, it's really worked. But that he was like the core of that team. He really held the defence together, and not just the back four, but the defensive midfielders in front of him. And he was a real leader, even being only 21, and he's very, very deservedly gone to Sevilla. I think he was a fantastic player for them, but they haven't replaced him at all. They've only brought Alexi Busan back on loan from Ligue 2, so there isn't really a natural replacement to him. I know that Diang and the rest of the defenders filling in have actually done very well. I quite like that back four, but even so, they're not of the quality of Longley. So both teams are going to struggle, I think, for the rest of the year, having not replaced the players they've lost.
And Nathan, who's had the poorest window for you?
I think again, for me, it's maybe two teams. We've already touched on Rennes, and they've had a poor window, but I'll skip over them. The other team is for a slightly odd reason, so I'll explain myself. It's Saint-Etienne, who have barely done anything anyway. And they are a bit boring, but it's particularly, and I don't know how many people of our viewers would have seen this, but the Anthony Mounier saga is probably the best way to describe it. He was brought on loan by the club from Bologna on Friday, January 27th, and he is now on loan back in Italy. We're not quite sure how, so he's either been bought fully outright by the club because there was supposedly a buy option in the Bologna deal, or that's been terminated and Bologna have allowed that and he's gone back on loan in Italy. But it's one of the weirdest things I've seen, that a player returning to France and then going back to Italy in about a 4-day span. It was a very, very, very strange one. But I do want to quickly mention on the positive sides we've missed out. I want to quickly say Toulouse did really well in bringing in Delors, and they've brought in Corentin Jean on loan. They could be really interesting signings for them as well. But yeah, I don't know what Ligue were doing. I don't know what happened on that. It was almost like they needed to sign someone and then realised they didn't really want him, and then thought, well, never mind. Strange.
All right. I would have to concur with your assessment, Nathan, and that of Rich of Rennes. I just think that the Diakabi and Hunu are fantastic prospects, but I don't know that they're ready to take the step up to be week in, week out starters. Having Grosicki and having Pedro Enrique, having Paul Georges Intep there is a bit of a safety net, bit of veteran skill, I think was really important for Rennes. I do think that they've missed a trick, especially given how there's not really been a team that's struggled, that's managed to establish itself, I should say, outside of that top three. So let's move on now to that team that did so well. Adam, will speak to you about Toulouse. Does the signing of Delors mean that Toulouse are going back to the 4-4-2 they used at times last season? And also, where does this leave Oscar Trejo, who for me has had a pretty decent season?
Yeah, the two very interesting questions. The signing of Delors, I've been thinking about it quite a lot this week and how they're going to shape up. And I have a feeling that Deprez would rather keep the 4-5-1 or the 4-3-3 that he's been using, and used well at times. Obviously, they've tailed off massively in the last couple of months, 3 months maybe. But I think Andy Delors will play through the middle, and I think Martin Braithwaite will be moved out to the left, a position he played really quite well last season when they had Wassim Ben Yedder, and he played up front, and Braithwaite was very much sort of on the left-hand side. Deprez likes to play. The only issue with that is that Deprez likes to play, or at least has this season, played very workman-like wider players. So you've seen like Isiaga Silla, Somalia, those sort of players playing at least one side with Jimmy Durmaz on the other side, which is slightly unbalanced because he's so much more attacking. Perhaps that's part of the reason behind that. So it would be a little bit of a shift because you have to imagine that Dermaz would then continue to start with Braithwaite on the side. And those front three of Dermaz, Delort, and Braithwaite looks really quite exciting for Toulouse. In terms of Trejo, I think he has done really well. There was a period perhaps when a long time ago when he was in the side when they had Adrian Regatan and Alan Casanova was there, and his form sort of tailed off a little bit, and obviously that he was sacked, and they evolved quite a lot over then. And he hasn't really been part of the team until Dupraz turned up and he was coming off the bench and he scored that goal against Troyes, which was a huge for them to stay up at the end of last season. And this season, Dupraz has said a couple of times, him and Alexis Blanc, who is a very, very underrated player in my opinion, but both of those two players in midfield are crucial for the way that they play. And if you look at the way that they started the season, which was so fantastic, all action, beating Monaco and PSG at home, and they really looked like they could challenge for Europe. It came to sort of early November. Trejo and Blanc both got injured, and Alexis Blanc, despite coming back, has had that heel injury, which has really been a niggly thing. And him and Trejo between them really run that midfield. So Trejo, I think, would, from Dupraz's point of view, would have to remain in the side. He's used him at attacking midfield and in central midfield at times. So I think even if they were to switch to 4-4-2, which they might do, if they're chasing games, Corentin Jean might come on and they might have that front four, him joining the front four. You've still got Blanc as that holding player who can really get about and really do water carrying midfield and protects the back four really well. And Trejo, who has proven that he's effective both in central midfield alongside perhaps one or two players in there as well. We've seen like Doumbia come back, Jan Bodegar I'm a fan of as well in that position. Or we can play behind the striker in a 4-2-3-1 or perhaps the furthest forward of a three in midfield. So I think Trejo's fine. I think he's an important player for them. And it's just whether Braithwaite can maintain the form that he showed on the left-hand side when they had Ben Yedder last year. So I think it's actually really exciting for Toulouse. I'm really looking forward to see it. It hasn't worked out for Ola Toivonen at all, though, this transfer window. It seems like his place in the team is very much under threat, having not started for the last 3 games. So, but he's a great option to have there as well. So I think it's really good business, as we mentioned, for Toulouse, and exciting to see how they line up. But let's hope Braithwaite can maintain the form, because I imagine he may leave in the summer, which is partly the reason Delort's come in. But yeah, exciting for them. It'd be great to see them back challenging for the top 6.
All right, Nathan, I'll speak about their opponents with you. Angers have had some canny signings this winter. I really like the arrival of Issa Sissoko. I thought he was fantastic when he was with Nantes. Really a lot of great energy running up and down the flank there. They've got their AFCON returnees as well. There's still no money spent. Does this team require a rethink tactically, or should Moulin stick with this 4-3-3 even with this flux of returnees and new arrivals?
Yeah, it's a strange one because I don't think there's another team, possibly in Europe, with that many different players coming back and a couple of signings, obviously, during the window as well. I don't think there's many teams with so much of a sudden influx of players again. So it might need a rethink and trying something different, because the 4-3-3 is just not working. They're not. They were better at the weekend, but this is the first time in a long time we've seen Angers do anything of note. Really, they've been really, really poor in the last couple of months. We mentioned it before, the breakup, that they had a terrible December that was followed by a tepid November. They got that win against Metz last weekend, and they got the win in the cup as well. But yeah, as Adam mentioned, the attacking players that Toulouse have now available to them, it makes them really interesting in this one. And with Angers' defence, who I can't remember the last time they've kept a clean sheet. I'm trying to look. Week 12 against Lille, when they were pretty poor as well. So it's been a long while, and that's including cup games against Granville. And that should tell you enough. They can't keep teams out. They're struggling to score enough goals as it is themselves. They've pumped in a few in the last couple of weeks. Do they play a 4-4-2 maybe with the players returning, more attacking intent? I'm not so sure. It's a tough one. I would, if I'm Moulin and the position they're currently in, they're just outside of the bottom 3 at the moment. They've sort of leaped out of that hole with that win at the weekend, but they're still in that conglomerate of teams in that area. I may be risking maybe slightly more defensive display and hold out for a point and see the fixtures going ahead, unless he thinks there's a chance of something coming out of this one and he can get it early and then pack up shop, then maybe. But it's a tough one because they are, even with inclusions, even with people coming back from AFCON, and then you take into account Pepe being just maybe a bit disgruntled might not be the right word because he wasn't really looking for the door, but he's maybe looking towards that at the moment, especially in the summer. The same with Ndoye, whose contract will go out in the end of this season. He'll definitely be leaving as well. It's an interesting time for Angers, and I'm not so sure they've got the strength to change. And if they do, it might be too much of a risk in a game away from home against a team like Toulouse.
All right. Good at predictions now. I'm going to personally go with a 2-0 Toulouse win here. I think that Delors is a fantastic signing. Just about any club in Ligue 1 would be happy to have him. So well done to Le TFC for picking him up. Adam, what about yourself?
2-1 Toulouse for me.
Hey, Nathan.
I'm going to be a little bit horrible and say 4-0 Toulouse.
All right. Big line. So let's finish things off then with a discussion of the Rhone Derby, and that's Lyon visiting Saint Etienne. This match does not have the sparkle it has in some seasons past. Adam, Saint have been scoring more, but there has been an element of luck to some of their play. Can they show us they can turn in a legitimate attacking performance, especially with Lyon and their weakened defense without Mukhtar Diakabi?
I have a feeling that they won't. They have been a little bit more effective in attacking areas, but whether they can turn in a legitimate attacking performance against Lyon is very much in question. I think nothing really changes for Saint Etienne. They're very, although they're at home for this game. Gaultier likes to play 3 centre backs against Lyon. I know that he switches that between 4-3-3 and that sort of 5-4-1, 3-5-2 sort of situation quite often, but he always seems to use that for the derby, and has done a number of times in recent years. So it's almost like they're not in this game. They try and play it safe, and I don't see them really having the attacking potential to start with. To even if they did play that 4-3, to pose that much of a threat in this game. They're really sort of all right. They're up to fifth or sixth in the league now, so they're returning to the position where we expect them to be. But it's like you said, it's almost been a little bit out of luck. So I think they're sort of bumbling along a little bit at the moment. Obviously, the tie of Manchester United is huge, but I don't see them getting past them. So I think that avenue of success, if you like, for Gautier has kind of been cut off, and their league form is really going to define their season now. And I think, as we mentioned last week on the pod, if Gautier doesn't get into the top, as I mentioned personally, that if he doesn't get into the top 5 or 6 and they don't get into Europe again, he's going to be very close to the exit door. But I just don't see them getting anything from this game, despite being at home. Last season, it was very much like the PSG Monaco game last week, where Lyon were very much the better team, and Soderlund nipped in at the end with Saint Etienne's seemingly only chance of the game to steal the victory, and that's the only way I see them getting anything from this game, with stealing it as they did on the counter last year. So without Beric, who's back in training, but as we said before, can't keep himself fit, they're really lacking in a genuine finisher. So I don't know that they're really going to provide much of an attacking threat in this game. But then that's nothing new with Saint Etienne. As Nathan said rightly before, they are a bit boring and possibly the least inspiring team in the league at some point. So I don't hold much hope for them coming into this one.
All right, Nathan, final question to you. This is a massive occasion for Bruno Genesio. Does a loss here, which would see Saint Etienne just a point behind Lyon, mean the end of his reign, or does he deserve to take this team further, particularly into the Europa League?
In terms of this season, I don't think they'll get rid of Bruno Genesio because there's not a name out there that springs to my mind, at least, that's a suitable enough replacement at this moment in time. A loss here might...
Just Remy Gard? He's in the background.
He's a name. It's not that. I don't think that's going to inspire a lot of people if you say Remy Gard is joining Lyon after his spell at Nantes. He wasn't.
No, Remy Gard, the former Lyon manager.
Oh, right. Yes. Then again, Aston Villa. I know it's a difficult circumstances and everything, but it's. Is it a good enough appointment for a club like Lyon that should be looking at Champions League football? Personally, no. Which means I think they'll stick with him until the end of the season, unless Oles thinks a loss here is that significant that maybe even Remy Gard comes in for the rest of the season. Maybe. But I think they see it out until the end of the season. I think he doesn't stay any longer than that. He's not good enough. I briefly touched upon it earlier that he doesn't know his best formation. It's tried 3-5-2. He's tried 4-2-3-1. He's tried 4-3-3. He's tried 4-4-2. He's tried a 4-1-2-1-2 as well. He's tried Tolisso at right back. He's tried him at centre attacking mid. He's tried him at defensive mid. He's tried him as a regular box-to-box midfielder. Although he's good at all of them, strangely enough. He just doesn't know what he can do with this team. And it's a potluck of what's going to happen. It's spinning a roulette wheel every week, wondering what Lyon team will turn up. And that's, for me, with the talent they have and the talent they've shown in Ligue 1 in the past, that's entirely down to the manager. And we mentioned this before the start of the season, that I thought that Genesio should have gone in the summer and they should have tried to bring in a bigger name if they could. I don't think it's good enough. And maybe, like I say, maybe a loss at the weekend does signal his end. But I think they'll stick with him to the end of the season because they've got no other options, really. And then he will go. And then hopefully, with the amount of spending going around Lyon, they can bring in someone that can inspire the squad again, because it might look completely different next season.
All right. What about score predictions, Adam, yourself?
2-0 Lyon.
Okay. Nathan?
Do we know the status of Lacazette? Do we know if he's...
Teams don't announce their squad still the day before. I don't know.
Right. Okay. I'm gonna risk that he doesn't play, and I'm gonna say this has 0-0 written all over it.
Right. I'm gonna go for a 1-1 draw. Then that is all for this week. Be sure to join us again on Monday as we recap a busy weekend in Ligue 1 and look forward to next week's midweek fixtures. Again, Ligue 1 is playing 3 matches in the next 8 days. So be sure to check that out. Thanks again to our guest, Rich Allen. You can follow him on Twitter at Rich_Allen85. For Nathan Staples and Adam White, I've been Eric Devin. Be sure to visit us online at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. Thank you, and speak to you next week.